Welcome to another session on cultural studies. Toby Miller's What It Is and What It Isn't, Introducing Cultural Studies, is a logical entry into the discipline called cultural studies. Toby Miller is a social scientist and an expert on media studies. He has various books and articles on a variety of topics. Sports Sex was published in 2001, Critical Cultural Studies in 2003, Companion to Cultural Studies in 2001, Cultural Citizenship in 2007, Blow Up the Humanities in 2012, and Greening the Media in 2012. Toby Miller begins with a punchline. Cultural studies is magnetic. Human sciences are usually dispersed or splintered, and they come under different names like Marxism, feminism, queer theory, and postcolonial. Cultural studies fuses all these, brings all these together, and today cultural has become a master trope or a motif or a metaphor in the humanities, and its focus is on popular culture and the margins. Canonical works are sidelined and focus changes to subcultures, popular media, music, clothing, and sport. How cultural works for the ordinary and marginal becomes important. People are not just consumers. They are potential producers of new social values and cultural languages. Conventional academic activity is questioned, and even new commercial trends become part of cultural studies. Cultural studies, in fact, resist definition as it is interdisciplinary. It focuses on subjectivity and power, and how subjects experience cultural and social space. And the method used is historical materialism. That is, history is the result of material conditions and not ideals. Cultural studies takes tools from economics, politics, media, communication studies, sociology, literature, education, law, science and technology, anthropology, and history to suit its purpose. Gender, race, class, and sexuality in everyday life, and its engagement with textual and social theory leading to progressive social change becomes important. Popular cultural practices have political importance, and this is best seen in subcultures. A subculture can be seen as culture that is distinct or different from dominant mainstream hegemonic culture. The word culture itself is loaded with meaning, and with the entrance of the prefix sub, culture takes on many dimensions. Words like subaltern and subterranean also go hand in hand. Subculture always focuses on resistance, and this is usually formed through and with the help of the media. During the post-subculture period, among the youth, there is aesthetization of politics and not politicization of youth. Dick Herbage's classic work, Subculture, The Meaning of Style, published in 1979, argues that subcultures use style as means of creating identity. And in this context, it's worthwhile to look at Stephen Greenblatt rephrasing subculture as self-fashioning. It's strange that in the postmodern world, there is subversion. Today, subcultures become mainstream. High culture becomes subculture, and fashion is retro. Subcultures question and oppose official, governmental, and bureaucratic patterns. They see culture as an empowering tool. The marginalized, like slaves, crowds, pirates, bandits, working class, etc., use subculture to question their downtrodden state. In the UK, studies show that teddy boys, bikers, punks, teenagers, school dropouts, etc., enter into subculture. These groups, through their bricolages or manipulations or improvisations, overthrow the materialistic tendencies of the middle class. Usually, such groups appropriate elements of the dominant culture and then create new meanings. Then they go on to become producers of new trends. One feels crazy, but rubbish becomes decoration. Torn clothes and faded jeans are taken over by capitalism and then branded. The media helps in their growth through publicity. The commodities thus recommodified have relevance in two ways. They reflect on the structures of the economy and also with structures of meaning. This would lead to a sort of cultural democracy, and cultural studies would provide a vibrant path of politicizing theory and theorizing politics. It is important to trace the evolution of cultural studies as a discipline. Four post-war English intellectuals, Richard Hoggart, E.P. Thompson, Stuart Mill, and Raymond Williams, can be called the pioneers. They were basically academics who studied class and nation at the level of lived experience or everyday life by focusing on industrial workers. Richard Hoggart belonged to the F.R. Lewis school or tradition, and he believed that literary study and pursuit of the popular would lead to the betterment of the working class. His work, The Uses of Literacy, published in 1950, is seminal. And he was also founder of the CCCS, or the Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies at the University of Birmingham. E.P. Thompson's classic work, The History of the English Working Class, published in 1968, looked at the past through the lives of ordinary people and in the process rejected theorization in the mode of Louis Althusser. Stuart Hall brought together the CCCS and the Gramscian knowledge into his studies on stereotyping and ritualistic resistance. Raymond Williams questions the ideas which believe that culture is a march towards perfection. Actually, focus should be on ways of life and values of specific communities at particular times. It should not be mere documentation of artistic work. Williams uses cultural materialism as a tool. That is, criticism of cultural texts should be linked to material facts of history. Culture is a whole way of life, and hence everything is cultural. And so, all forms of cultural production must be studied like a material product or produce. Social practices are most important, not genius or individuality. Art and society is project and formation. Culture works in relation to the material life of society. For example, language is simply a part of the social world. Whether an organic group produces artworks or artworks produce organic groups, there is always internal politics involved. Cultural materialism speaks about buildings, cars, films, fashions, etc. And it explains how products of the ordinary people are repackaged and sold to them. Williams also argues that culture is divided into three. One, the dominant or the hegemonic. Two, the residual. And three, the emergent. All these ideas are certainly under Gramscian influence. The dominant hegemonic culture or mainstream culture somehow acquires a sort of consent and behaves as normal. Whereas residual cultures belong to the past but are still influential. Emergent cultures come from a new class, a subculture or youth, but soon they are incorporated by the dominant with the hegemonic strategy. These changes can be seen in the structure of feeling. That is, there is always a competition between official culture and practical consciousness leading to the quality of life. Thus, community life with its conflicts, social nature and cultural nature become supreme. Toby Miller also graphically looks at the evolution of cultural studies in UK, Europe, US and Africa. The influences of Roland Barthes, Umberto Eco, Louis Althusser, Michel Foucault in France and Italy. In the US, Paddy Vanel, Grossberg, John Fiske, etc. In Africa, the contributions of Frantz Fanon, Amilcar Cabral, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Ngugi wa Miri. In Latin America, Jesus Barbero, Garcia Canclini, etc. Cultural studies also incorporated concepts like ideology, hegemony, ethnography, gender, feminism, queer theory, polysemy, intertextuality, discourse, micropolitics, enculturation, hybridity, etc. into its fold. Toby Miller concludes by hinting at the contributions of Mantya Dayavara, who worked seriously on multicultural issues among the blacks in the UK and US, influence of Latin American cinema, works like The Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Pablo Freire, the contributions of Salvador Allende of Chile, Michel and Armand Martelat, the Kamritu Center, etc. In South Asia, intellectuals belonging to the subaltern or post-colonial group like Ranajit Guha and Partha Chatterjee have also contributed greatly to the evolution of cultural studies.